welcome to the Nordic Mythology podcast. I'm Daniel Farrand, owner of the company Horns of Odin. And as always, before we jump into the show, I do have to plug our Patreon. It is how we keep the lights on. It's how we keep going. It's how the show, is still around all these years later. And that's just Patreon.com/Nordic Mythology podcast. We have a ton of bonus episodes that you can get over there. You don't only get ones going forward, but you get all the back catalogue. So at this point, there's years of extra material that you can binge on if you want more of the show. One of those is we do a Q&A with the guest every week right after the main show. So not only can you sit and watch the main show live, but you can then join in with the Q&A after. And it's just, if you have an episode that you like, you get that little bit extra. It ends up just being an extension of the main show, but people get to ask questions. And a lot of the time there are questions that I've missed or overlooked. So there's usually quite a bit of information still to be found in those bonus episodes. We do story time episodes, which are a lot of fun as well. The best way is just to go and check it out. It's Patreon.com/Nordic Mythology podcast. And it's literally starts at £3 a month. It's less than a price of coffee. If you ever wanted to buy me a coffee, I get a bunch of messages, people saying thank you for doing the podcast. And the best way to kind of help would be, just buy me a coffee via the Patreon. You can listen to it and check it out and see what you think. And I promise there is a lot of stuff on there and a lot of worth and value to it. But let's jump into today's show. So we're recording this on Easter Sunday. So Margaret is busy. I think Easter's a huge thing in Norway, not quite as big as it is maybe in the UK. So I'm flying solo for the first time in a while. And my guest today is Connor Benson. So Connor, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
So do you want to just let people know kind of who you are, what you do, that awesome hoodie that you're wearing?
Oh, we'll get into these hoodies. I got a lot of love for my artist who makes these hoodies. I am just a regular guy who loves Norse mythology, and I decided to make a business out of it. It started off, ironically, very disingenuously. I worked in retail for 7 years while studying. I hated retail. And I decided one day that I would just try and supplement some of my wage to buy some more time for myself by finding some cool Viking symbols, which we'll get into, and putting them on some items of clothing and some other things. So I was using a site called Redbubble.
Let me take one guess what those Viking symbols were.
Take one guess, you'll get it correct.
I bet I get in three. I bet I don't need three guesses, but I bet I can guess the top three. The Helm of Or, the Vegvisir, and the Valknut. It's got to be.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, I didn't do that for very long, but that was kind of the idea. It was, ironically, it was around about the same time I was doing my master's, and my master's was in design management, and I was putting it all towards, entrepreneurship, building a business, and I didn't really sort of know where to go with it. And I took some interest in the Vikings and Norse mythology. I was playing a game at the time called For Honor. It's sort of like a medieval combat game, and there's a Viking faction in that. And the designers at Ubisoft, if they do anything right, they got the characters looking really fucking cool.
So is that what got you into all of this?
A game, and a game that's not even that deep into the Norse mythology. It was kind of the aesthetic, and then I just took interest in it from there, and then I just started learning. And then what I found is that as I started doing this Redbubble thing, where I was putting these Viking symbols onto clothing, I started researching, and then I started realizing that that while I was posting some content, I started realizing that what I'm posting isn't necessarily correct. And that's when I sort of went down this rabbit hole of, there's a lot of shit here that's not correct. And there's a lot of people that are actually doing this for just a profit and nothing else. So very quickly it became I don't want to be like that. And I decided to put all of my focus in my master's dissertation into just branding this into something and just rolling with it. That's what happened. And the university didn't really like that because it was very selfish. The whole thing is they wanted you to do something that others could read and benefit from. So if it was starting a business, it was how can, if you was to read this, how could you start a business? And I didn't really care about that. I wanted to make it all about my business, which I did. And I got the lowest grade, I think, in my class. But now grades don't matter when it comes to university. It's not for creative subjects, I don't think. And now I have this to show for it. So very quickly, it went from disingenuous and let's see how much money I can make to actually, let's just delve into this and see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Years down the line, I have this awesome hoodie.
Yeah, you do. Okay, so what's the goal behind this? Like when you say this, what is this?
Obviously, there's a financial aspect to it. I left my job.
I was more meaning just for like anybody who doesn't know you, like at all. This is the first time they've ever come across Connor Benson. Like, what is this? Like, what do you do? What's your love? What's your passion? What's the whole thing?
Go-to person for Norse mythology. That's my goal.
Okay.
I want to. So I guess the main projects I'm working on are books. I want to tell Norse mythology through books, and I want to make the best Norse mythology website that I can. That's out there. I'm trying to dethrone Norse mythology for smart people.
That is the one though. That's when I first started on this journey, and I guess probably most people listening to this will have stumbled across the website Norse Mythology for the smart people, which I always hated the title. I don't know why they called it that. I don't know.
I kind of get it. I think it's an amazing website. It's fantastic. It's just not visual. It's kind of boring, but it's very informative, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I kind of wanted to merge Norse mythology and art and just kind of see what happens. And then when I was talking about sort of the financial side of it, it is kind of, this is what I want to do for a living. I really like Norse mythology, so I want to do Norse mythology for a job, as simple as that sounds. So, and I've just kind of spiraled from there and just sort of seen what I could do. Now it's obviously I'm a long way away from doing those books, at least the Norse mythology book, because I am waiting on a lot of art. I work with an illustrator, and we have maybe, 150 pieces of art for the book, some of which you can see behind me here. A lot of time goes into them. So it's nothing that we plan to rush, but that is the goal, is to make some really, really interesting books. There are some fantastic books out there. You've got like Neil Gaiman's Norse Mythology. You've got Daniel McCoy's The Viking. Is it The Viking Spirit? I've got it here. Yeah, The Viking Spirit. There are some amazing books out there, but none of them are very visual. And I don't think that should be something exclusive to the realm of TV. So we're going to come in and do something a bit different, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I saw on your website how it says that you want to kind of bridge that gap between the everyday person, I guess, and scholars in a way.
Yeah.
There is obviously that gap, and that again is probably one of the main reasons behind this podcast. Is that so? I definitely understand that aspect of it. Just wanting to get that middle ground, because there is this area where you get people entering into it, and they do go down the road that me and you probably both did, of seeing a surface thing, seeing us like Nordic mythology as this thing, and that before you get into it too deep, you think that we already know everything, and that everything we know is almost from some sort of like scripture, and we just know, and you can read it and it's fact. And so you just kind of take it as that, and you don't have the time to maybe research and figure out that that's not true. And then as you go down the path, you then realize, oh shit, all of this for the most part is subjective. It's all written by people kind of who believed a different faith. It's this whole different thing, but then it's hard to then figure out the scholarly side and what's true and what's not. Not everyone can, has the time to get into that. So this middle area, I think, is really important to try and pick people up.
We've effectively got the Poetic Edda and the Prose Edda are our best sources. And, and these are things that were written down some 200-300 years after it was an oral tradition. So it's this really weird thing of it's the best we've got, but it's not complete. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot to work with in there. And I think I like those two as I find that they're really good sources to go through. There's a lot of mythological information in there. But again, there's so much contradictory information. You'll have one story which says that at Ragnarok, Fenrir was the one to eat the sun, and then another story says no, it was actually I can't remember if it's Skoll or Hati. I always make this mistake, but it was either Skoll or Hati that eats the sun, and it's like, how can those two coexist? And it's so confusing. But I think there's a lot of fun in that, and I think there's a lot of room for, I guess, creative interpretation. I don't know if you've played the God of War games, the new ones.
I haven't, no.
You may have talked about it, but they did a fantastic job with Norse mythology because they kind of just cherry pick and just build their own story. Nothing's concrete, So I guess we know what these two sources have told us, but there's a 200 to 300 year gap between what was, maybe said at the campfire and what was written down by scholars who, like you said, subscribe to a different faith. So we're kind of pulling at strings a bit.
Mm-hmm. So I guess then my main question has to be, how do you try to make sure that it's as accurate as possible? Because obviously and again, you put it into example there, you have stories where Fenrir eats the sun, and then you have ones where it's Skoll or Hati. So there isn't a definite answer. And I guess it's hard to write something and make it interesting, but also say, oh, well, we don't know, by the way, we don't know if it was this or this.
Yeah, that's kind of a difficult one. For me personally, I think that, I guess, creative interpretation is, well, not creative interpretation. I don't know the exact word I'm looking for, but I think I don't much care for historical accuracy to an extent, but not to the point where, I would go looking through every runestone I could find to get every detail. So, for example, in our Norse mythology book, the one I'm writing, it will be Skoll and Hati that eat the sun and moon, and instead Fenrir will break free from his chains and he'll go straight for Odin. To me, that kind of makes the most sense. And the way around that is to write a disclaimer, which is, we don't have all of the information. And I'm bridging the gap between the scholars and the regular everyday people, but I myself am not a scholar, and I don't take much interest in being a scholar, I guess. I don't want to sit and read through 300 texts just to know, which wolf did what. I think we have 3 wolves, we can draw them in a fucking amazing way, and we can show this cool story at Ragnarok. So I don't want to leave Skoll and Hati out just because it was maybe Fenrir, but then at the same time, do a variation of that story where it is Fenrir, because we can create the art for that. So I'm more interested in kind of, I guess, creatively presenting the stories in a very exciting way than really digging to the bottom and taking a scholarly approach, if that makes sense. I know some people will take issue with that, but I don't know. I think it's absolutely fine.
So, okay, yeah. Like you say, I think it's how it's labeled, it's how it's put out there. Obviously, if it's put out there to be 100% accurate thing, then there would be an issue. If you put a disclaimer in it and say, we don't do this, that we don't know this. But then again, does Neil Gaiman's Norse Mythology have a disclaimer in it? It's been a long time since I've read it.
Does, and he takes inspiration from both Snorri and from the Poetic Edda, which is what we're doing.
Yeah, of course. Like that. So it feels like that's the market you're going for. That very much kind of like entry, entertaining, like aspect, which is needed. Like Jennifer just said in the chat, like those scholarly sources do exist, but for the most part, those sources they're extremely hard to find because the research papers are going to be extremely expensive. Or if you do manage to get a hold of them, they're not written for everyday people either. They're mostly written for
language that we don't know.
Yes, so they're written mainly for other scholars, and it makes it quite tough to do. Which again, like why I love doing this podcast, because it bridges that gap. And I think you do need that entry level piece. Like I mean, Neil Gaiman must have sold thousands and thousands and thousands of books to people who just have an interest in this, or somebody knows somebody who has an interest in this, they pick it up and they read it. And that must be the basis for so many people getting into this world.
Yeah, well, so you think there's TV shows like Vikings, and people, it's become such a widespread thing, and people love Vikings. So
that was how I got here.
I have still not watched it. Mine was a goofy, terrible video game that we put way too many hours into. Mm-hmm. But my whole thing is like, so you've just watched Vikings and nothing else. So I'm here to say, well, here's some really cool shit, that you can read that they took inspiration from. And I think we'll be doing the story of Ragnar in our book, but not to the kind of level that show did it. But, there's so much cool and unhinged shit that happens in Norse mythology that, and there's all these people there that have kind of taken this slight interest in it. And because the books will be so accessible, I think there's something good there. One of the books we are working on, which we are, I'd say halfway through because my artist has done all of the art for it, is we're doing our own version of Havamal. I plan to present Havamal as a self-improvement book because another big thing in this community, and you see a lot of people posting stanzas of the Havamal, because it fuels that really cool, like Viking, I guess you could call it an aesthetic or, like a way of life. Mm-hmm. So you might have seen some of my posts, but we're going post by post. We have this character that we made whose name is Einarr, hence Einar's journey, because this book is his journey. And we're effectively going to look at every single stanza of the Havamal. I'm going to look at how the scholars have translated the Old Norse. I'm going to write my own interpretation based on that, and then an analysis for every stanza, and it will effectively be a self-improvement book. And I think this is something that a lot of people have connected with, because you can kind of call it, I guess, Viking wisdom, even though it was written down like some 200 years after the Viking Age. But there's definitely a space for this kind of thing that I think people are looking for. I mean, I have a few different books on the Havamal, and there's not really much of an analysis aspect to it. It's more of just a translation. So that's the next book we're working on. I've started formatting that, and there's a lot of writing to do. But yeah, we're going to kind of present this as 164 chapters of how to improve your life, based on, this 1,000-year-old wisdom, a lot of which is still relevant today because they deal with topics like hospitality and, how to treat your neighbors and just how to be a good person. So I think, especially in this kind of chaotic social media age, we could maybe do with some of that. Mm-hmm. So that'll be our next book. That'll be coming this year. Well, our first book, so to say. The Norse myths might take a bit longer.
So is that, I guess that would be the Havamal through like modern eyes then, because I guess traditionally would mean one thing, and then looking at it in a more modern setting, you would be able to interpret those things maybe less literal. Am I right in that?
Yeah, so the goal is to look at every stanza of the Havamal and just and look for a message that can be extracted from modern day life. Mm-hmm. So, for example, the first stanza, which is about when you enter a new threshold, it's sort of looking around because you don't know who's a friend and who's a foe. In the Viking Age, that might be walking into a tavern. You don't know who's approachable and who's not. In the modern age, especially here in England, that could be walking into the pub. So it's not that much of a difference. Of course, some of the stanzas are a bit, they're clearly written for their time, but a lot.
We're probably alluding to the similar sort of ones, because there are some, I would say, problematic ones for modern times where Odin can be quite. It's been a long time since I've read it, but I feel like there's a few sexist ones in there. They're disparaging to women. What was that? Sorry.
I posted one of them recently. Stanza 84. It's the one where you should not trust the words of a woman because the heart of women were molded on a wobbly wheel. It's hilariously absurd, but I still posted it and sort of looked for the message in it. Unfortunately, I didn't get cancelled because I did handle it professionally, because I don't necessarily agree with that statement at all. And the wisdom was kind of just, if you find those people that are no good, then avoid them. And it's the same, he talks, Odin talks about women and he also talks about men. But yeah, you're absolutely right. There is definitely some more sexist stuff in the Havamal that absolutely belongs in its time. But I don't think that means we should cast it out. There's still something in there for us that we can, that we can find. It just doesn't necessarily have to be the exact same message as it was. So I'm not going to present that in the book as don't trust any women, because that's absolutely absurd. But I'll present it more in the sense of, if you come across someone who is clearly, proven to be untrustworthy, here's maybe some of the things you can do to handle that and, and get out of that situation.
Would there be any temptation to rewrite the stanza, I guess? So,
no.
Which I'm not saying, I guess I'll play devil's advocate where I need to. I personally, I wouldn't rewrite it. It is what it is. That's what it says. And I don't think I'm not always a big fan of rewriting history because of modern times. As long as you present it as what it is from, this is what it is.
Yeah. So with my, I guess you could call them English translations. They're not so much because I'm not translating the Old Norse. I'm reading 4 or 5 scholars' versions of the Old Norse, and then I'm saying, well, this is clearly what the message is, and here's my version, because a lot of it has to do, I enjoy my creative writing, so I'm not trying to alter it too much, but I'm also not trying to copy. So it's kind of a difficult line. But no, when I wrote my post on Havamal stanza 84, the actual stanza itself, what I wrote was still quite brutal, because that stanza is quite brutal. But then in my analysis, it's like, fucking hear me out, let me cook, I don't actually think this. And there was a few people in my comments that I guess either wanted to troll or took it the wrong way. But for the most part, of the 100 and something comments I got, men and women alike clearly took it as it was meant to be taken. It was well handled, so to say, by most of the people in those comments.
We touched on this a little bit before the podcast, on kind of like the nature of social media now. And I think, unfortunately, the people who probably commented negatively won't have read the description. A lot of people have this unfortunate habit of reading just the post and what's in the post and only reading that. And it's this tough game you have to play, because you almost have to leave it quite controversial, because that's the game of Instagram now. The way you become popular on Instagram and successful through a medium like that is you have to cause some sort of controversy for the most part to get that interaction. It's all based on interaction. So you want that kind of there. And I did a post the other day about Utgataloki, and basically I'm just like, what
I saw the post.
Yeah, just getting people to wonder like the moral behind the story. The story sees Thor being bested in some in what seem like quite simple tasks, but they turn out to be, through trickery, to be impossible tasks. Yeah, so he gets beat in the tasks, and I posed the question sort of, what's the moral? Because on one hand, the god is getting beaten, but on the other hand, he does really successfully against these impossible tasks. So is it actually a show of strength? And the amount of
he gets beaten by an old lady in a wrestling contest, and he drinks so much mead that he lowers the ocean level.
Yeah,
it's really weird.
And we had a bunch of people who commented on that who were just like, oh well, the old lady is just old. She's she's old age. Like, and I'm like, yeah, if you just read the description, that's what it says in the description. That's the whole point of the post. But the amount of people who don't read it, they just see like the post and then go, oh, I'm going to comment on this.
A fantastic example of this. So I've not been growing too much for a long time, but during one of my massive growth spurts came from a single post, which is where I showed the Vegvasir with the 24 runes around it, and the text was just, "This is not a fucking Viking tattoo." and I explained in the description. I think you get something like 2,200 characters on Instagram, and I wrote to the end of that. I had to delete some stuff just to get it all in the caption, and I wrote everything I thought in the caption, and I explained to people that I'm on no high horse, because when I was, I think, 2021, I stupidly went online and typed in Viking tattoos and found the Viking compass, which was really cool. Yeah. And then I got it as a tattoo. So I tried to explain that I'm now posting this so people don't get that tattoo like I did and then feel stupid like I do. Now, some people get that tattoo and they don't feel stupid. They're absolutely happy with it. That's fine. But I do. And I want this covered, because every time I look at it, I'm like, I remember that I was a fucking idiot. And I did a few more.
Would you not want to keep it because of that? Like I like for my tattoos, if I have any that like that, I think it's quite a leveling exercise. And when I look at it kind of humble me and think, okay, don't get ahead of yourself. You are still a fucking idiot, really deep down.
Yeah, I mean, I'll always know it's there. I'll always look, whatever I cover this with, I'll look at it and I'll know what's underneath you. But mate, I get what you're saying for sure. I don't particularly like this tattoo much. I'm more interested in the ornamental stuff. But there was a lot of people in the comments on that post that didn't read my description, and they were just like, "You're a fucking gatekeeper. You're telling people what they can and can't do." And at this point,
you know the people who are saying that, the people who have the same tattoo.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I just comment back to them people. I'm like, read the post before you make yourself look stupid. Like, I know you haven't read that description, and you know that I know that you haven't read that description. I did it for the Vegvasir. I did it for the Helm of War. I did it for the Berserk rune. Gets me the most. That one is absolutely fucking hilarious. It's the brand of sacrifice from the Berserk manga, and put online as the Viking Berserker rune, and that it just makes me laugh, because it couldn't be further from the truth. And I put a post about it, and I had so many different, kind of crazy comments from people telling me, that I'm gatekeeping and all this kind of bullshit.
It's insane, isn't it? Because obviously, I feel like we have a similar sort of mindset and an end goal of just trying to be somewhat accurate and help people find accuracy, but also do it in a creative way, whether it's through like through my business or through your business, and make it entertaining and visual.
With the symbols, there is a certain level of I guess what's the word I'm looking for? There is an absolute level of accuracy needed, because we have grimoires for those symbols, and we know what the Vegvasir means, so we can absolutely post, write a blog post, which is what I did on my website, and tell people what that is, and we can tell you why it's not the Viking compass. With the Norse myths, it's a lot more open, because it's much further back and there's much less to work on. It's the same. It's the same when you start looking into the runes. There's no, I guess, definitive way to write in. I primarily, if I'm writing, I use Younger Futhark runes. But you could take a runestone that was written by one guy in Norway, and then take a runestone that was written by another guy in Norway, and they might have used different runes to write, the same word. It's not like it was properly taught. It's not like there was a Norse myth, well, we wouldn't know, but it's not like there was a Norse mythology Sunday school in the fucking Viking age.
Yeah. Well, there wasn't. There was a lot of factors that would affect, whether it's the geographical location, the time period. You would also have, there's no standardization of spelling, so people would be saying words and spelling them how they kind of interpreted it, and so there isn't this standardization. So you get a whole different variety of things, and as part of my post that I made the other day, that I mentioned before, I think that is actually part of the beauty of all of this, because it isn't rigid. You get something like the Bible, it's there, it's written, you have to follow this. Whereas with everything, to do with Norse mythology and what they may or may not have believed, it's really open to interpretation, and it allows people to put that into their lives and make it somewhat personal and kind of adapt it to their lives. And I think that is why there is such an interest in all of this, because there is so much gray area, but it also causes insane battlegrounds online.
I think this kind of stuff is absolutely hilarious. But you are absolutely right. There's so much sort of fighting over this sort of, over this sort of thing. It's quite hilarious to see. Somebody will post something and you will look at the comments and it's like, no, you're wrong. And then there's a comment responding to them and it's like, no, you're wrong. The runes is where I find that this happens the most. The runes is
the runes is a sketchy one. It like they invoke emotion in people like nothing I've ever known.
They absolutely do. My whole thing, because a big chunk of my work is my commissions, and a big chunk of those commissions is in runic art. If you go to my website, it's Norse mythology and runic art. I do a lot of runes. I do a lot of bind runes for people, and my philosophy is in both bind runes and runic writing. I think creativity is much more important than historical accuracy. The people from the time in which the Elder Futhark runes are not here anymore. And you've had this thing where kind of we don't truly know if there were meanings attached to all of the Elder Futhark runes. It's just become this thing with modern pagans, and we've all seemed to agree that that the T rune stands for this, and that and that Fehu stands for this. But then, like you said, there's a big kind of battleground happening there. I did an ebook on the runes, and it wasn't the most, I suppose, scholarly thing, but I tried to, similar to what I'm doing with the Habermas, I tried to look at it from the perspective of self-improvement. So if the first rune is about wealth, there are people that have come to me and asked me for a bind rune for wealth, and I kind of have to explain to them, it's like, I'm not going to draw a rune for you and you're going to wake up tomorrow with £1 million in your bank account. It's like, so how about we look at it like this? How about wealth gained through hard work is I think how I present it in the book. And it's like, so how about you use that as a kind of motivator to go and earn some, to go and make your own wealth. But
this reminds me of an episode I did recently with Albert, who Albert Beyond Shield. We did an episode on magical staves in Iceland, and he creates staves for people, and he has a similar sort of mindset of like, you can't guarantee that it's going to just bring you all the things that you wish. That's unfortunately not how these things work. I wish it did.
I think especially with the runes, I think they're good visual motivators. I think if you get a rune, if you get a bind rune from someone and they explain that these are the runes that I used and these are the meanings behind it, and then you put that on your body, I think we can look at that and then you can look at that symbol and you can see that one rune is meant for one thing. Oh, okay, I need to take action on that. I need to do this. I think that's a better way to look at it than, oh, this is going to bring me all of the things I want and it's just going to happen magically. Which is how I approach it with the people I design bind runes for. I'm like, this is not a thing that's going to do the work for you. Here's the meaning that you wanted. Here's a series of actions that you can take to step in that direction. It's on you now. And here's a cool thing that you get to kind of commemorate that, I guess to commemorate your dedication to making that happen is probably how I would present it.
Yeah, I think it all goes down to the type of people that use them, because I don't know if did you ever see The Secret, the book? Have you ever heard of that?
I don't think so, no.
So the Secret, the book, I can't remember exactly when it was popular. Maybe someone in the chat might be able to find out. But it was this book that I remember Oprah Winfrey promoted it as well on her show. And it was this idea of effectively you just wish for things and they'll happen. Like you just kind of, all you have to do is put really a lot of strong positive mental attitude into it, and these things will just come to you through the ether. Yeah, you'll manifest it and you will get it. And for some people it worked, but I would say that it worked for those people because they didn't just sit there and hope that it was going to happen. They thought about it and attempted to manifest it which then made them take the steps to act in a certain way, which led them day by day towards their goal, and then they eventually achieved the goal.
I'm sorry to butt in, but if I guess you could say manifest the best Norse mythology website, out there, and then I sit every day and I write a new post and I get more artworks from my artist, and I work on how it looks and how it functions and how it navigates, and I spend every day working on that for 5, 10, fucking 20 years, then absolutely it will come true. You're putting the work in to do it, but I can't just sit there and go, I want the best Norse mythology website. Let me go and do nothing but commissions, and it's going to happen, because it won't.
Yeah. I think it is that. So that it just reminded me of that when you said about with the runes and how writing them down.
Sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt. It could even be SIBO, but then if it works, it's still a kind of, it's still a good thing. But no, bind is something I find very interesting, especially because I've been making them for years. I've been doing that since I rebranded the first time I did a rebranding, which was a long, long time ago, and that's been, I guess, a large basis of my work. And I really enjoy making those, and you can really see that it's something that people really tend to connect with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but bind runes again. We do a bunch of like custom bind rune horns. It's a similar sort of thing where I let people pick a certain amount of runes, and they can then, I'll put them into a bind rune and carve it on the horn, and I'll create the bind rune for them. And I really love it. There is something about it because it is very creative, because not all bind runes are equal, as I'm sure you know. Like, some people make bind runes and they're just a little bit ugly, and then some people make them and they're just fucking stunning. There's just something about them where they just flow nicely. You do actually, yeah. I've seen some of yours. They are good, but they flow nicely and they look good.
Yeah, I was saying, have you seen some of the 250 I made for my Norse mythology encyclopedia? I made so as you said, not all of them are equal. There are some that are more stave-like, and then there are I've done a bunch where it's, I guess you call them meaningful bind runes, which I use the Elder Futhark runes for, because people have kind of agreed that they come with their meanings. And then I did an ebook, which was the Norse Mythology Encyclopedia, where I gathered something like 250 Old Norse names of Norse mythology characters, and I made bind runes of every one of those names. So, for example, Thor, I took the Younger Futhark runes and then made a bind rune of his name, and I did that for Thor, Odin, gods, goddesses, Valkyries, beasts, giants, name it. It's probably in there.
Yeah.
So,
okay, I had a question, and I'm going to ask it, but please don't take this in like an offensive
no, ask it.
But I'm curious. If when making things like that, how do you then not kind of become the thing that you wanting to kind of avoid? And I don't mean it because you're wanting to, but obviously when we make things like that and you put them out into the world and put them on Instagram, not everything can have like a little disclaimer on it, as much as we all would love people to read the descriptions. They don't. So when you're putting things out, how do you try and stop people then just lifting them and then going, oh, well, this is the bind rune for Valkyrie. I'm going to go get it tattooed on me. Do you know what I mean? And I'm not having to dig at you, because obviously, like, that's...
No. I have a fantastic example of this. So I've been doing this project for a very long time, and it did start out with some Elder Futhark bind runes, and similar kind of thing. I wanted to do all the gods and goddesses and just take the runes that correspond with their names, make it into a nice bind rune, and then put it into an ebook. And there was a very old post I made where I did 5 of them. I think I did Odin, Loki, Tyr, Freya, and Thor in Elder Futhark. Tyr was incorrect, and I think Freya was... I don't think the runes were incorrect. It just didn't look that great. and somebody took that from Pinterest, which was taken from my account, and it was put on Pinterest as Viking bind runes, which obviously I did not say that it was. And then somebody posted in one of the Facebook groups that he had tattooed it onto his face, all 5 of them. And I think, how do I describe it? I don't see that as my responsibility, because somebody has not only stolen my work and then put it on Pinterest, but somebody has also taken that and then not thought to try and find out if it's true. So if it's, I guess the moral of this is, if it's stolen from me, I don't care. It's wrong, you know. But I get you. I get what you're saying. But in the ebook there is a disclaimer. I've given the way that I've used the Younger Futhark runes, because the Younger Futhark was used alongside the Old Norse. I've kind of given my system, and I've kind of said that, you know, this is how I'm doing it. I'm doing it for reasons of consistency. Message me before you use anything so we can double check that, you know, I didn't make a mistake. But I think there's a difference in me doing a project like that and somebody just taking a well-known symbol as the Vegvasir, because these bind runes are my own, aside from, which was on it was on a rune stone. It didn't look obviously as clean as my digital version, but it was inspired by this one rune stone, where I'm guessing because of the lack of space, Thor's name was presented as a bind rune.
That is the reason most, if we do actually have any evidence of bind runes, the ones that we do have tend to be because they've just gone, oh shit, we ran out of space here. Yeah, we need to just
I'll do it this way.
Get these on there somehow.
Or it's we'll just cut this line out and save this space. You know, I've been doing this for 9 hours, man. I know I've been paid for this. I can't be bothered. Let's just get this rune on here and go home.
I always think it's an interesting thing, and like I say, it's in no way a dig at what you do, because I think overall you're attempting to do something that's incredibly difficult to try and organize this and to put it all out there for people to at least get a good grasp of somewhat the best attempt at being accurate without having to go down like a huge scholarly level.
Like I said as well, I value more, I guess, I value creativity more than I value accuracy, especially when it comes to the runes. I think if we lock ourselves into, well, this is how they did it, then we're not going to get very far. And I can't help but to think, well, when the runes changed from the Elder Futhark to the Younger Futhark, surely there was some people during that age that, you know, during, I guess, that transition that were like, no, I don't like this. These were better. You know, all this new modern stuff is terrible. So we may be doing the very thing that was just done in the past. And from my perspective, it's like, let's just kind of roll with it and just see what we can put out there. And if you look at some of the stuff that's being put out there in terms of bind runes and art and tattoos, it's fucking amazing. It's absolutely just exploding into all this crazy shit. And I love seeing it. I love seeing the direction that it's going in, especially bind runes.
Yeah. Yeah. There's some stunning work out there. I like I say, I guess my reservations was just having the two projects, one being attempting to, because for the most part, there is when you make a website like you're making, there is a responsibility that to understand that most people that come across this probably aren't going to know that they're going to go on it and go, this is just like we all did with Norse Mythology for Smart People. They're going to come across it, and if you do get to that point where you're bigger than that website and it becomes the go-to, you're gonna there is like a responsibility that comes with that, in my opinion anyway, that to try and let people know what is accurate, what's not accurate, and keep that thing of what is. And that doesn't mean that you can't have artistic interpretations. By all means, it's amazing fun. And I think it'd be a really boring place if you didn't do that and other people didn't do that. But yeah, I guess it's just trying to find that, wondering how you do that balance.
I guess, Yeah, I mean, I don't think I've spoken much about the actual bind runes on the website. I've kind of left that to the ebook and just kind of summarized what's in there. So when you download the ebook, I do kind of explain that, I'm not saying that this is right. I just did it because I wanted to. And I guess because it's the bind rune aspect to it is more of just a fun thing that people can go and get if they want to.
And they are fun.
Each one of the names comes with a summary. So I've looked through all of the sources and just kind of tried to summarize what this character is, especially with the kind of rise of AI, because I wrote the draft for it. I wrote the draft for it using ChatGPT, which was just to get something on paper, which was unpublished. And when I came to each name and then really started researching it, AI does not know Norse mythology. AI is not good with Norse mythology.
People obviously have their strong opinions on AI. Now, I've used it to help, usually with things like product descriptions, or sometimes dabble with like for posts. But as you say, it doesn't understand the nuances of kind of what we want. Particularly, I think in this area where I would say you're probably similar to me, that we want to stay away from that quote unquote Viking bro style of this hyper masculine kind of thing, but ChatGPT and other AIs lean into that aspect. So if I ever say, sometimes if I try to use it for ad, like to write an ad, just to help me write an ad, it will just lean into this very kind of like, Vikings are cool. Like, you want to be a Viking? Buy this drinking horn because you'll be a Viking. Like that kind of thing. But for all its faults, it does help with like structure, and you can kind of then use your knowledge to just kind of feed in and put and change it and put bits into make it.
I use it to help with my English Havamal. I guess I call them interpretations. My English written version of each Havamal stanza. So I'll take a few different readings that I'll take a few different translations. I'll read those. I'll write something, and I'll write that into ChatGPT, and then I'll say, give me 20 different versions of this. And then there'll be a word in number 16. I'm like, I like that word. I'm going to take that, and then I'll cherry pick different words and then rewrite it myself. If you're an individual, for example, like me, and you're trying to accomplish all of this stuff that I am, because I take a lot onto my shoulders. So if you're trying to accomplish all of this, it absolutely has its place, especially for things like, for formatting text, checking for spell errors. You can, I guess, train it to ghostwrite for you, which is you train it to learn your writing style. So it absolutely has its way. I don't use it to write posts because I take enjoyment in writing my own posts, and especially those for my clients. I wouldn't ever use it for my.
So do I. When I write a long post, I just love doing it, and
it takes a while, but yeah.
It gives you freedom, because I love creative writing. In another life, when I used to, so before I started Horns of Odin, there was a fork in my life where I was either gonna follow Horns of Odin or try be a comic writer. So I ran a few Kickstarters for a bunch of different comics. So self-published a couple of anthologies, and I really enjoyed it. But there's just fuck all money in it, especially like that level where you've got to be hustling. You've got to be going out to all the Comic Cons, sitting there for hours trying to sell your comic that you self-printed. You've already got all the money laid out. So Horns of Odin was the avenue that was making money now. This is what I need to follow. But so I had to kind of knock it on the head, and just kind of leave that creative writing side alone. So when I do get a chance to do it and kind of tell a story in posts, I love it. It just unlocks something in me.
One of my clients, you follow her actually. It's Morrigan, tattoo artist.
Yeah.
I guess post on, I write some of her posts and post on her behalf, and we obviously do English and French, so I'll have her check the French. But one of the things she's quite adamant on is she likes the posts to be Norse mythology heavy. So when I write a post, and because she mostly does Norse mythology tattoos, there's just so much creative writing involved, and it's so fun. But yeah, I have to write my post. I couldn't use ChatGPT to do that, because my posts are kind of my way to talk to the community. You know, it's not just something I have to get out. So yeah, I get you in that regard.
Yeah, you can get your personality across. And I think in this world, and we're touching an hour anyway, and I have a couple more things that I wanted to ask. So we'll probably go into the social media side in like the creator episode after, because I guess that is more what you do. You probably make most of your living, I guess, from the social media management side, which I think will be. So we'll get into that kind of after this. So if anybody wants to hear that side of it, and we're going to hopefully look at the website more in detail, but I definitely want to pick your brain in terms of social media. We can get our opinions on it and how it works and all the things. So if people do want to hear that, it'll be on our Patreon. Again, it's just Patreon/Nordic Mythology Podcast. But yeah, before we do wrap up this, I do want to ask, do you work with any scholars? Has that become at any point of like, have you thought?
So I don't personally work with any scholars. No, I mostly just do this on my own, and then I have my artist, Lucian Illustrations, who is the one who drew this hoodie for me. So it's mostly just me and him.
Mm-hmm.
I do all of the writing. He does all of the art.
Yeah, the art style is awesome. I do love the art style, but I just wondered whether there was an avenue where you could work with some, a scholar in some way and get that. And yeah, I guess in a way it adds that almost like seal of approval or that like validity to things. And obviously you can't do it for all of it, but there might be like bits where they might be willing to write a section or look over something.
I would honestly love to be connected with the right people to make that happen. That would be amazing, because I could have things checked over and, they could say, right, well, here you're leaning more into the creative side, and here you could mention this thing that happens. I'd love that. I'd love that so much.
I'm sure I know a long list of scholars that maybe we could chat about after. we could point your way, because I think there'd be a bunch of people, particularly I would say like my old co-host Mateus. He springs to mind because he's a very quote unquote young scholar, and like he's very open about things and how he looks at things. So I think that would be he'd probably really like something like that and loves doing those kind of projects.
Scholar look over, like I guess if I was to write a draft of the book and then a scholar could look over that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, and if you could get someone to maybe write like a foreword for it,
definitely.
And it just adds that little, like that little bit of that little extra seal of approval, doesn't it? If you can get like a decent, well-known scholar who can just pop their name on it, and it is that kind of endorsement, I guess, and just lets people know that this has been, well researched. So yeah, Demery in the chat says that Mateus is great in consults on.
Yeah, honestly, that would be writing. Love that.
So yeah, we can have a chat about that after. But I think that would be a nice little avenue, and just to help make sure that you get that kind of nice balance. Yeah, I think this has been a fun chat for the main show. Like I say, we're gonna carry on and chat a little bit more and look at your work a little bit more in depth and have a little more chat. Let the patrons get involved a little bit and ask some questions. So like I said before, if you do want to listen to that, and we have a few of these creator style ones. We did one with Thorsten's workshop, Terry, which was fantastic. Terry is an amazing guy. If you haven't listened to that main show episode, you definitely should, because he's a very much an inspirational guy. He's been through a lot in his life. And then the one before that, the first one we did was with a friend of mine, Tricky, who makes Little Bone Millionaires. And yeah, these creator episodes are great. So you can get all of those on like I say, Patreon/Nordic Mythology Podcast. And yeah, I think if you want to shout out where people can find your work, your Instagram.
Yeah, so it's Einarr's _journey on Instagram, EINARRS _journey. And and then the website is just einarrsjourney.com. I think I mentioned before we started this episode, last week, week before, I spent a good 12 hours through the week just completely renovating the website. So it's a lot easier to find things.
It does look pretty.
Thank you. I had looked and make over like 50 different icons. So it could be more visual, and he got involved with that. He was super happy with that.
It looks beautiful. And I actually wonder how many people listening to this have seen your posts and don't realize they've seen it. Because I said to you again before, the art style that you use is very, just very you now. Like it's iconic. As soon as I see a post that is in that art style with that kind of like that bluey glow to it, straight away I'm like, oh, that's Einarr's Journey. Like I know what that is. I know what I'm getting.
I've posted over 1,000 times as well.
yeah. But I think that it's a huge part of this social media. Again, like I said, we'll talk about this a little bit more.
Branding is so important.
And yeah, it's a huge part of it, and I think you're nailing it in this world. Yeah, in this world where, you know, everyone's struggling for that attention, to stand out and have a unique style that straight away people look at and go, oh, I know exactly who that is. It's a special thing. And there's a few people that do it. There's you, there's Matt, the Saxon storyteller, who's a good friend of mine. Like, again, you see his artwork, his style, and there's a bunch of people who are doing like that kind of thing, but his has his own feel to it. He's not copying other people's. He has his own flair, his own thing. And as soon as you see it, you got that's
Saxon storyteller.
Yeah.
Same with Val here as well, with the grey artwork. I'm actually working on something with Matt.
Matt's a good guy. He does. We've done tons of stuff together. Yeah, he's helped me out a lot. So yeah, it's really important. And like I say, we'll jump into that after this and chat all about the social media side of things.
Oh, definitely.
So we'll wrap up there. Like I say again, if you want to carry on the journey with us, eh? Been doing this a while. It's patreon.com/Nordic Mythology podcast. Starts from £3 a month. If you want to follow me, it's Daniel_Fire1. I try post a bunch of little historical videos every day. On there, they're a lot of fun. I really enjoy learning about them. On my Instagram, it's not just Nordic mythology or Viking Age. I just pick a subject I really like and try condense it down into 90 seconds to make a reel. So I did a little series on the Alamo and a bunch of stuff that led up to the Alamo. I posted one yesterday on bloody flags, which are just like these deep red blood flags, which symboled that you were getting no option of surrender, that there was just going to be, you were just basically going to get executed. So yeah, if that sounds of interest, definitely go and check those out. And obviously the business, Horns Road, and then just Nordic Mythology podcast across the board. It's, if you type it into whatever platform you're on, whether it's Facebook, YouTube, then you're going to find us and whatever we're doing at the moment, I guess. But yeah, let's wrap up the main show and we'll get creative. Ooh.